Parents are traditionally viewed as the primary source of unconditional love and the ultimate safety net for a child. They are the mirror in which a young person first sees themselves. However, when that mirror is distorted by toxic language, the psychological damage can be profound and lasting. When a parent uses cutting phrases such as, "You look terrible," or "You're a freak," they are not just expressing momentary frustration. Instead, they are striking directly at the core of a child's developing identity during their most vulnerable years. This form of image shaming causes a child's insecurities to skyrocket because they lack the emotional maturity to realize the criticism is a reflection of the parent's own poor emotional regulation rather than a factual statement. To a developing mind, a parent's word is absolute truth. Labeling a child as a freak sends a devastating message that they are fundamentally ill-fitting or negatively abnormal. This can plant the seeds for long-term body dysmorphia and a deep-seated belief that they are socially unacceptable or inherently unlovable. The danger lies in the lack of an external frame of reference. A child does not know that this behavior is toxic. They often assume this is the standard for all families. These verbal arrows eventually become the child's own internal monologue, leading to a lifetime of self-doubt and social anxiety. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward breaking the cycle and healing the inner child. We need to understand that the words spoken to us in the past do not have to define our value today. If this resonates with you, or if you want to learn how to heal from these verbal wounds, comment the number 1 below to see the full video and join our community of support. Building on the damage of personal insults, another subtle yet equally destructive tactic involves undermining a child's emotional legitimacy. When a parent responds to a child's requests or self-expression with phrases like, "You're so immature," they are doing more than just criticizing behavior. They are effectively silencing the child's voice. This type of language is often a tool used to end legitimate discussions or to dismiss a child when they attempt to express their basic emotional needs. By framing a child's feelings as immature, a parent conveys a sense of disgust and ridicule that makes the young person feel inherently inferior or undeveloped as a human being. This specific form of shaming strikes at a child's natural emotions and interests. When a parent treats a child's enthusiasm or curiosity with contempt, they create a home environment where the child begins to feel that their very personality is wrong. This creates a persistent, heavy sense of shame that follows them into adulthood. The child starts to believe that their personal likes, dislikes, and unique perspectives are unworthy of respect or even attention. They learn that showing their true self leads to mockery, so they begin to hide their identity to survive. Over the long term, this emotional suppression prevents the child from developing a healthy sense of self-confidence. If you were constantly told your feelings were childish or invalid, you likely find it difficult today to participate in open dialogue with authority figures or partners. You might feel a lingering fear of being laughed at whenever you speak your mind. Breaking free from this cycle means recognizing that your emotions were never the problem. The problem was a lack of emotional safety in your upbringing. Your needs were valid then, and they are absolutely valid now. The transition from emotional shaming to the direct threat of abandonment marks a shift from criticizing who a child is to threatening their basic sense of safety. A particularly damaging form of toxic parenting involves attacking a child's security through terrifying statements such as, "I am going to send you to boarding school," or, "Once you are 18, I am kicking you out." While some parents might dismiss these comments as just blowing off steam or using tough love, to a child, these are not just empty words. They are loud, clear communications that the child is a burden and that the parent's love and protection are strictly conditional. When a child is repeatedly told they might be sent away, they do not see it as a disciplinary measure. They interpret it as a fundamental lack of desire from the parent to guide, protect, or even want them around. This creates a deep psychological wound because a child's survival depends entirely on their caregivers. Similarly, the constant threat of being evicted the moment they reach adulthood creates a looming sense of chronic anxiety. Instead of looking forward to independence, the child feels like a nuisance whose presence is merely being tolerated until a legal deadline is met. This environment prevents a child from ever feeling truly celebrated or cherished within the family unit. They grow up feeling like a guest who is overstaying their welcome, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid the eviction they have been promised. This fear of abandonment often follows them into their adult relationships, leading to an intense need for reassurance or a fear of getting too close to others. Understanding that these threats were a form of verbal neglect is crucial for healing. You were never a burden. You were a child who deserved a permanent place to belong. Pause for a second and take a deep breath. If you have ever felt like you had to earn your place in your own home, click the like button right now to show yourself some love. When a child lives under the constant threat of abandonment, they become highly susceptible to the next stage of toxic parenting: psychological manipulation. Toxic parents often use manipulation as a primary tool to maintain control, frequently using the devastating phrase, "This is your fault." By shifting the blame for complex family issues, or even the parent's own personal unhappiness onto the child, the parent effectively plays the victim. This reversal of roles is incredibly damaging because it forces the child to become the emotional caretaker of the adult. Instead of being protected, the child is made to feel like a curse or a constant problem that must be fixed to keep the peace. This behavior triggers a survival mechanism where the child develops intense people-pleasing tendencies. They may find themselves essentially enslaving their own needs and desires to the parent's whims just to avoid conflict and maintain a tiny crumb of acceptance. In this distorted reality, the child believes that if they can just be perfect enough, the parent will finally be happy and the threats of neglect will stop. However, because the parent's issues are internal and not actually caused by the child, this perfection is an impossible goal. This dynamic is a major barrier to the development of healthy boundaries and true accountability. Because the child is forced to carry the heavy emotional weight of the parent's failures and frustrations throughout their entire upbringing, they struggle to understand where they end and where others begin. As adults, these individuals often feel responsible for the happiness of everyone around them, leading to burnout and toxic relationship patterns. Breaking this cycle requires the realization that you were never the cause of your parents' unhappiness. You were a child, not a scapegoat, and you are not responsible for carrying burdens that were never yours to begin with. As the child becomes increasingly burdened by the guilt of manipulation, toxic parents often introduce a new tool to solidify their dominance: the weaponization of respect. In a healthy family, respect is a two-way street built on mutual trust and understanding. However, many toxic parents use the command, "Show me some respect," as a shield to deflect any accountability for their own harmful behavior. By demanding unquestioning obedience, regardless of how they treat the child, they create a confusing environment where respect is no longer about honor, but about submission. The child is taught a dangerous lesson: that age or status alone grants a person the right to act unethically or disrespectfully without any consequence. This rigid power dynamic is designed to stifle a child's critical thinking. When a child is punished for asking why or for pointing out a parent's hypocrisy, they learn that it is safer to stay silent than to seek the truth. This prevents the child from questioning the very toxic dynamics they are living in, making them easier to control. By demanding respect as a verbal command, rather than earning it through consistent, healthy interaction, the parent seeks total psychological control over the youth. They treat the child's natural need for autonomy as a form of rebellion that must be crushed. The long-term implications of this teaching are particularly dangerous. When a child is raised to believe that they must respect those in power, even when that power is being abused, they carry that vulnerability into the workplace and their future adult relationships. They may grow up believing that they must accept abuse or mistreatment from anyone in a position of authority, whether it is a boss, a partner, or a peer. Healing from this requires redefining what true respect actually looks like. It is important to realize that respect is not a license for abuse, and having boundaries is not a sign of disrespect. It is a sign of health and self-worth. The culmination of this toxic journey often manifests as a direct attack on a child's potential and competence. After a child has been silenced, threatened, and manipulated, the final blow often comes through overly critical remarks regarding their skills and abilities. Statements like, "You are the worst student," or "You are terrible at sports," serve a very specific purpose. They degrade a child's self-esteem to the point where their motivation to try anything new completely dies. While constructive feedback is a vital part of growth, these absolute negative labels act as a permanent confirmation of the child's deepest internal doubts. Because children naturally trust their parents' judgment above almost everyone else, being told they are the worst creates a profound sense of being undeserving of success. This toxic conditioning turns hobbies, education, and learning, things that should be sources of exploration and joy, into primary sources of tension and fear. Eventually, the child associates the pursuit of excellence with the pain of criticism. These comments form a calculated pattern of verbal abuse used to maintain power. By ensuring the child feels too incompetent to ever thrive on their own, the parent keeps them emotionally dependent and small. However, the most important lesson to take away from this is that these labels were never about your true ability. They were tools of control used by individuals who did not know how to nurture greatness. Your worth is not defined by the worst or freak labels of your past. Healing begins when you reclaim your right to be a beginner, to make mistakes, and to enjoy life without the fear of judgment. You're capable, you are worthy, and you have the power to redefine your own story from this moment forward. If you found this series helpful and want to continue your journey of healing and self-discovery, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos on breaking toxic cycles.